Okay, I'm going to make this as quick as I can, just so the file size doesn't get too big. So, if you've created a pattern or texture tile in Photoshop using the offset filter method that I've showed um, or watched my YouTube video on doing this, um, we created a 2-inch square and then went through the offset filter to clean up the seam that you would form in the where the tiles meet each other. So that's already been done here, but it is a 2-inch square. So for you to use it in Illustrator or at a smaller scale in as a fill in Photoshop, um, you're going to want to reduce the size of the tile. So if you've got that 2-inch tile, you can simply in Photoshop simply go to Image, Image Size. I've already defined it as a pattern, by the way, but I'm going to have to, when I change the size, I'm going to define it as a pattern again so that it knows that I have an option of the big square or the little square. So right now you can see in image size that it's 2 inches by 2 inches. Well, I'm going to change that to, well, thinking about the scale in Illustrator, I'm I'm going to make it I'm going to change it to 0.5 inches. So it's a half an inch square. And that might even be big. Okay, this is going to take a little longer. Because see what happened here? My resolution went all the way up to 1200. I forgot to do something. So I go to Image, Image Size. I want to make sure that Resample is clicked. That way my resolution will stay the same, but I can make the tile smaller. So now I've got a half inch by a half inch. I'm going to say OK to that. You'll see it get smaller on your screen. Ignore that. And I'm going to go to Edit, Define Pattern, and fine. I'll leave. Well, I'm going to change this as whoops, small. I'll just call it small. And I'm going to say OK. All right. Now that I have that as a pattern, I'm going to make sure that I have a large enough area that I can work with. So I created an 8.5 by 11 inch page, and I wouldn't need it that big, but I made it that big. And I'm gonna fill it with, I went to Edit, Fill, picked Pattern, went into the Custom Pattern box and got my small one. And I'm just gonna say OK. So now you can see that I've got this, my seamless pattern that I can now place over in Illustrator and use it as a pattern fill in Illustrator. But first, I need to save this. So I'm going to save it. Oh, brother. I'm just going to save it as a JPEG. I could save it, keep it as a Photoshop, but and that's pretty big. I can probably not sure I need to make it that huge. Let's go with 8. I'm just doing this for speed. You can keep it big if you want. Okay, so now that has been saved. So I'm going to duck out of Photoshop. And in Illustrator, what I want to do is I want to go to Place. Oops. File. Place. And then navigate to small. Where did I put it? Wrong place. This is a new computer, so everything's not where I want it. Where'd you go? You saw me save it, didn't you? All right. Did I save the wrong thing? Save as. Oh, was it untitled? Oh, jeez. Okay, I was looking for the wrong thing. That's what I get for rushing. Sorry about that. So I gave it a name, JPEG. Fine. Alright. So back in Illustrator, I'm going to go to File, Place, and I can use either untitled or small. And I'm going to say place. Now when I place that, I get a little version. So I can stretch it. I want to make sure that it's big enough. And I've got enough for the top and the bottom. But I want to make a duplicate of this because I want to fill the top and the bottom with the same pattern in this particular demonstration. So I'm going to hold Option and drag to make a duplicate. Okay, here's the process with a clipping mask. What I want to do is make sure that the outline that I have of my top that I want filled with this particular pattern, I want to make sure that it is on top of my pattern. So I'm going to make sure that it already is, but I'm going to just double check and bring it to the front. I put a black stroke on these shapes so you could see them, but you don't even need a stroke color or a fill color. So once I've got that moved to the front, I make sure that I select the outline that I want to clip to, and I want to hold Shift and select the pattern itself. So now both objects are selected. Then I can go to Object and Clipping Mask and Make. And it will stuff it inside your outline. So if I want, and then I can just grab this and move it over onto my croquis. And then I can do similarly with the skirt. And of course you can use different patterns or different treatment, of course. And there again, I want to make sure that the path that I want to clip to is in front of my pattern. Hold Shift. Well, an alternate is if I take my black cursor and drag a box big enough to touch both of the objects, it'll select both of them. And then again, I go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. So now I've got my top and my skirt both with the same pattern in a scale that, and if the scale is not work for your eye, or it's not what you want, you can just go back to your Photoshop tile and save another version, and don't forget to define it as a pattern again and save it at a smaller or larger size. It's a little bit of a pain, but it works. And sometimes in Photoshop you can get that pattern that you can't pull off in uh, the Illustrator's pattern engine. Also in Illustrator, if you're making your own pattern, I'm going to do this super fast because, again, file size could get big. So if I select all three of these pieces, and again, we're in Illustrator, go to Object, Pattern, Make. Just say OK, because that just puts a swatch in your swatch palette. And then you can mess around with how this sits for you. All right, I'm going to go with that. Click the Done if you like it. And now I can, I'm going to make a new shape to fill. And there again, just fill with your new pattern. So once again, same kind of thinking. If this is too big, well then just shrink your initial pattern down. And you're going to have to, again, go through the Object, Pattern, Make, and essentially do the same thing. So I'll have a bigger one in my swatch palette and a smaller one in my swatch palette. And then I can just select that shape again and just go get the one with the smaller pattern. So that's how you can create a pattern in Photoshop and bring it over to Illustrator, or use Illustrator's engine to create your pattern. But either way, if the scale that you need is off, go back to the source or the origin and make it either smaller or bigger and just redefine it. In the case of Illustrator, it's through the pattern Make. In the case of Photoshop, it's under Edit, Define Pattern. Okay, hope that helped. Hope this is small enough that it doesn't take forever to open or download. So, cool. Thanks. Hope it helped.